more importantly was Stanislav Grof. In his book, Realms of the Human Unconscious, which had just been published. This was in 1978, a long time ago now. He outlined the results of 20 years of working with psychedelics therapeutically. He laid out the nugget of the method, which was followed quickly in 1980 by his book, LSD Psychotherapy. And as soon as I saw his work, I was very impressed with it, and I trusted his scholarship. I trusted his intellect, and I saw the relevance of his work not just to clinical psychology and healing, which is Stan's work, but to my discipline, which is philosophy of religion. So I knew that I wanted to get involved in this. It was like hearing a soul's call. And so I began my own psychedelic work. In the beginning, I had been meditating through college at that time, and had encountered the usual blocks that people encounter in the early years of their meditation practice. And at first I thought by doing some of this LSD psychotherapy, I could break through those blocks and achieve realization faster. Well, it didn't quite work that way. Stan outlines two protocols in his work: a low-dose approach to working with psychedelics therapeutically and a high-dose approach. The high-dose approach was really developed in Spring Grove Hospital, where they were working with terminally ill cancer patients in order to relieve death anxiety, basically to try to trigger something like a near-death episode with them, to give them a glimpse of where they were going. And it was very effective. And so I thought, well, if you could do that work, and they were limited to 3 sessions. And I thought if you could do that work safely 3 times, you could do it more than 3 times. And so after 3 introductory sessions, I chose to work with the psychedelic protocol, a high-dose protocol, partly because I was married at the time and it was difficult to find time to spend an entire weekend doing this type of work. And I thought it would just be more efficient. I thought I could get through my personal karma, so to speak, biting it up into bigger bites and processing it and moving it through. But I learned down the road that I was making all sorts of false assumptions. I had assumed that working in these states of consciousness was about personal healing or personal enlightenment. I had a personal model of the psyche that I had brought to this work. But after 2 years, I was going into experiences that were so profound, cleansing, purifying experiences that were fundamentally collective in nature, having to do with the collective psyche, that eventually I had to let go of that model of personal transformation, and I began to entertain what was to me a radical hypothesis that in this work, if you work with highly aroused states of consciousness, the subject, the patient, actually can shift from the personal side of things to the transpersonal side of things. The patient actually becomes some aspect of the collective psyche itself. So basically, I began this work. I tried to work systematically. I brought all my historian's training and philosophical training to a rigorous protocol. I kept detailed records of every session. I wrote them up within 24 hours. And it ended up lasting 20 years. I worked for 4 years, and then I stopped for 6 years, and then I continued for a very intense 10 years. I did, on average, about 5 sessions a year, which some would say that's not much. But if you're working with high doses in a very contained environment, and I was always lying down, headphones, eye shades, shut off from the world, attended by a sitter who was managing the music, and my sitter was my wife, Carol, who was a clinical psychologist. So I had clinical support, I had a lot of logistic support, and I just dove into the work, and it didn't finish. I started when I was 30 years old, and I finished this work when I was 50 years old. And then I took another 20 years to digest that work and wrote LSD in the Mind of the Universe.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that, Chris. It's just so incredible to me. Your journey is so powerful. And of course, I love how you state that when you started, you had no idea this was going to last 20 years. I think it was 73 sessions over the 20 years.
Yep, 73.
And yeah, I also found it fascinating that you had to do all of this in secret all of this time. And in your regular life, you're a very well thought of award-winning professor and author, and never being able to share any of this work with anybody except perhaps your wife. And I don't know, maybe a couple other people in your inner circle. But how did that play out for you?
This was 1978, and the United States had made psychedelics illegal in 1969, 1970. We knew that the door had closed when Harvard fired essentially Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert and Ralph Metzner. So I knew that there wasn't an avenue for doing this work legally and wouldn't be legal for the indefinite future. So I had no choice. If I wanted to do this work, I had to go underground. I don't like breaking the law. This is the only area of my life where I've broken the law, but I just went underground. And in the early years, it was just the price you paid to do this work. But I found in the later years, I found it becoming, the secrecy, increasingly burdensome. Because when you divide yourself and you're allowed to say certain things to some people and other things to other people, you create divisions in your psyche, which they start on the surface, but the longer you go, the longer those divisions begin to seep into your psyche. And it was the secrecy that allowed me to do this work also became a burden in my own psychological health. So it was I just accepted the risk. I accepted the challenge of doing it this way. And I was glad eventually when I was able to come out of the psychedelic closet, because the psychedelic closet can be just as injurious to your soul as any other closet where we hide our being from the world.